watch that USB the moment I left. He didn't know the files weren't just documents. They were a roadmap, code commits, timestamps, screen recordings, internal emails, and a voice memo he forgot he ever left. That room would feel very different in 10 minutes, but I was already gone. I wasn't angry. Anger's loud. Anger needs to be seen. No, I was finished, done folding myself into corners, done letting other people put their fingerprints on my work and call it theirs. There's a special kind of silence that lives inside betrayal. It doesn't scream. It just settles into your bones like cold water and waits. That morning, I had packed everything from my desk into a single box. A mug, a stapler, an old birthday card. 16 years, distilled into cardboard and tape. No one stopped me. No one asked questions. Because the moment a company smells your usefulness drying up, they pretend you were never part of it. But I knew every inch of that code base. Every decision tree. Every failure that taught us something. Brian had walked in 9 months ago. I had built the foundation 9 years before he ever learned our server structure. He walked in with charm. I walked out with proof. And now I let the silence do the talking. I didn't need to fight him in that room. I just needed the board to see the truth. He thought I was the quiet one, but he never realized quiet doesn't mean powerless. Some storms don't make noise until they arrive. He thought he was making a speech. I was submitting evidence. When I first joined the company, we worked in a cramped second-floor office with peeling paint and a server room that doubled as a break room. There was no prestige, no press, and barely enough funding to keep the coffee machine alive. But I saw something real, a challenge, a blueprint waiting to be drawn. I wasn't anyone's boss, just a systems engineer with a stubborn streak and a whiteboard full of ideas no one had patience to hear. So I stayed late. I wrote code no one asked for. I solved problems before they became visible. I didn't network. I built year by year. That mess of cables and duct tape grew into something solid, a platform, scalable, clean, fast, the kind of system that made big investors lean in. By the 5th year, we had a team. By the 7th, we had an acquisition offer. The board turned it down, said we had something special. They were right. What I had built wasn't just software. It was infrastructure, invisible but essential. And I never once asked for my name to be on the headline. I thought that was maturity, but maturity starts to rot when left unrecognized for too long. When Brian was hired, I didn't think much of it. The company had grown. We needed someone polished to stand in front of cameras. He walked in with tailored suits and a voice made for keynotes. First week he brought muffins, smiled at interns, scheduled alignment talks. Everyone liked him. I didn't mind. Until the meetings started changing. He'd ask me to explain our back-end design, then interrupt halfway through to translate for the room. He'd pitch roadmaps that mirrored slides I'd sent him days before. Once I caught him presenting a chart, one I built manually, with errors I recognized. I stayed quiet. Maybe it was ego, maybe it was just his way. But the pattern didn't stop, it got sharper. He started requesting edit access to internal docs, then stopped looping me in on key calls. Then he introduced his new architecture vision in an all-hands. Was mine, word for word, only he added colors and a mission statement. After that meeting, I stood outside the glass wall, watching the applause. My inbox was empty. No acknowledgement, no CCs, just silence. And yet, I still didn't speak. Instead, I started saving things. I exported logs, kept copies of original prototypes, found old Slack threads where I explained design principles to him, in detail. The worst part wasn't that he stole my work. It's that he did it with ease, like he knew no one would believe the quiet engineer over the polished leader. I opened a new savings account, stopped leaving my laptop unlocked, started taking mental snapshots of conversations, rehearsing timestamps, building a mental case I wasn't sure I'd ever use. Even began backing up my private project folder to an external drive, just in case. The signs were there, the late-night calls I wasn't invited to, the HR check-ins that suddenly felt like exit interviews, the way he smiled at me in passing like I was already a ghost. And still, I said nothing, because the storm hadn't arrived yet, and I never strike before the clouds break. One Thursday morning, I walked into the office and my security badge didn't work. No red light, no green, just a beep that didn't open anything. The intern at reception looked at me, then glanced down quickly. I took a step back, Swiped again. Same beep. An IT guy I'd mentored years ago came jogging over with an apologetic look. They're updating. Clearance levels, he said too quickly, should be fixed by tomorrow. But my gut knew. Access doesn't just get updated for directors. That afternoon, Brian held a leadership sync. I wasn't invited. Instead, he scheduled a one-on-one. With me at 5:15 p.m., last slot of the day, classic move. Late meeting, long delay, fewer witnesses. When I walked in, he was leaning back, shoes off, drink in hand. He didn't offer me a seat. Didn't offer me eye contact. He just said, "We've been thinking about ways to streamline technical leadership." I nodded. "We believe your talents would be better applied in an advisory role." There it was. They weren't firing me, they were ghosting me while I was still breathing. An empty title, no team, no access, no meetings. A shelf to sit on while Brian climbed. I smiled, said nothing. He mistook my silence for consent, and that's where he made his first real mistake. The next week, I returned every company device, except one, a backup laptop I used during a network outage 3 years earlier. It had logs, dated prototypes, audio from product brainstorms, nothing illegal, just truth they forgot to delete. I rented a safety deposit box, printed key documents, code samples, timeline spreadsheets, included the Slack thread where Brian asked, "Can you just clean this up and put my name on it for the pitch?" I didn't even respond at the time, but now it was gold. The thing is, Brian wasn't a villain, not really. He was just predictable. He thought charisma could replace competence. He didn't realize that while he was busy performing leadership, I was archiving it. Every time he edited my documents, I saved the originals. Every time he rebranded my designs, I noted the file paths. The closer he got to the spotlight, the more invisible I became, and the more I disappeared, the more I documented. That's the advantage of being overlooked. You get to see everything. When he told the board he'd built it from scratch, I didn't flinch, because I already knew the ending. Not a courtroom, not a confrontation, just a quiet room, a board of directors, a USB drive, and the weight of truth waiting to be played. By the time they realized what I'd built, I was already gone. But the foundation had my fingerprints all over it. I didn't storm out, I didn't slam doors. That's not how you win a war like this. I started with a spreadsheet, 3 tabs, one for source files, one for key meetings I had been excluded from, and one for inconsistencies in Brian's reports that no one else seemed to notice. At first glance, it looked like a normal product roadmap, but hidden in plain sight, each cell was a breadcrumb. A trail that, if followed, would reveal the architecture behind the lie. On the second Tuesday of that month, I booked a meeting with a lawyer. Not the kind you find with billboards and slogans, the kind you find when you've spent years working. In quiet rooms with powerful people. She didn't ask many questions, just read, highlighted, and nodded. "This is clean," she said. "No lawsuits, just exposure. That's all I wanted. I wasn't looking to burn the company. I just wanted the truth to be undeniable." I kept working, even as they phased me out. I answered emails, showed up on time, helped interns debug their code, all while backing up every system log I could still access. Emails, shared drives, even meeting recordings where Brian's voice trailed into arrogance. One in particular stood out. It was a strategy call. He thought it was off the record. I had left my recorder running by accident, or maybe not by accident at all. He said, "Mark's smart but old school. They'll forget about him by Q3. I copied that file 3 times, one to the USB, one to the cloud, one burned onto a DVD and mailed to myself, sealed and time-stamped. Redundancy is underrated. I also started digging deeper into his early weeks, his hiring. Turns out his references weren't as bulletproof as they seemed. One was a shell company, another hadn't existed. In 5 years, I tracked down the domain info, took screenshots, dated them, all legal, all verifiable. But it wasn't just about proving he lied. It was about proving I told the truth every step of the way. So I printed receipts, archived timestamps from repository commits, compiled emails where I shared architecture drafts months before his arrival, each one a thread in the same fabric. This wasn't his. He hadn't built anything, he just changed the font. Meanwhile, I kept a low profile, smiled in hallways, attended meetings I wasn't needed in, even brought coffee to Brian. Once. Just to keep him comfortable. Comfortable men stop looking over their shoulder, and that's when you move. He was rehearsing his next big pitch. I was building the stage he'd fall through. It wasn't just ego, that's what hit me first. Brian wasn't simply taking credit. He was using my work as currency. In a contract buried deep in the finance drive, I found a proposal sent to a private firm, one that had been flagged before for unethical acquisitions. The numbers didn't lie. He was positioning our platform, my platform, as proprietary IP tied solely to his leadership, inflating valuation in a way that would funnel bonuses through a side LLC he quietly registered in Nevada. It was clever, but not careful. He left metadata, signature timestamps. An early draft of the agreement still had my initials in the corner, from a version I wrote 2 years ago. That's when I stopped collecting and started arranging. I created a folder, neutral name, buried 2 levels deep, Q3 Asset Optimization. Inside, I layered a chain of documents, design specs with track changes, meeting notes with attendees, a PDF of the side LLC's registration, and finally, the voice memo, his voice, his words. He thought he was being clever. I was just being patient. I encrypted the folder twice, uploaded it to a private server I owned, registered under an old college domain. I named the link something forgettable. Sent it to one board member, just one, the quiet one, the one who once pulled me aside during a retreat and said, "I know who really builds the house." No subject line, just a sentence. "You'll want to review this before next quarter's vote." I didn't hear back. I didn't need to. At work, nothing changed. On the surface, Brian still smiled during team lunches, still made jokes at meetings, still called me the legacy genius, like it was a compliment. But he started checking his phone more, started canceling last minute. One morning, I caught him outside the restroom staring into space, lips moving like he was rehearsing. That's when I knew. The link had been opened. What I didn't know yet was what they'd do with it. Would they bury it? Would they turn on me? Would they protect their star? I prepared for all 3, cleared my home office, deleted local backups, replaced my phone, quiet steps, not hiding, just stepping aside. If they came for me, I was ready. If they didn't, they weren't ready for what came next. I wasn't afraid, not because I had nothing to lose, but because I finally knew how to win without fighting. He built a story on my silence. I built evidence in his shadow. Only one of us knew how it would end. It happened faster than I expected. 2 days before the quarterly board meeting, Brian called for a last-minute leadership sync. Only the directors were invited. But I knew exactly what was about to happen. I walked past the glass wall of the executive conference room just as the lights dimmed and the screen flickered on. From where I stood, I couldn't hear the audio. I didn't need to. I recognized the folder name and the freeze in Brian's face when the first document loaded. First came the timeline, then the code ownership logs, then the memo, his voice clear as crystal saying, "I just need to make it look like it's mine." Investors won't check, they never do. Silence, not theatrical, not angry. That particular kind of silence only happens when people realize they've been lied to professionally, on paper. I walked to my car, didn't even turn to look at the building. I'd already deleted my keycard from the app, cleared my calendar, forwarded every email that mattered to my personal archive. I didn't need to be in the room to win the room. Later that night, I got a one-line message from a board member. "Thank you, that will be all." 3 days later, Brian was transitioned out. The statement was vague, corporate, respectful, but internally they knew. He hadn't just stolen credit, he'd manipulated financial records, misrepresented intellectual property, compromised the legal standing of the company in a pending acquisition. Wasn't there to watch him pack. I didn't need to be. My job was never to punish, my job was to reveal. Let the weight of truth settle where it belongs. That Monday, a private HR consultant reached out to me, said the board wanted to offer clarification of legacy ownership, a formal title and a consulting retainer, should I choose to remain involved. I declined. The truth had already done its job. I had nothing left to build there. He built a story on performance. I built a case in silence. One collapsed the moment the truth stood up. They didn't issue a press release. They never do when the embarrassment is internal. But the change rippled through the company like a quiet quake. Brian's calendar disappeared overnight. His office door was shut for days, then emptied. New memos came down, revised. Structures, internal audits. The product team had a new interim lead by the end of the week. No one asked questions, no one said my name, but I noticed how certain eyes followed me when I walked into the cafeteria that Thursday, not with pity, not with admiration, with understanding. They knew, somehow they knew. You can't fake that kind of shift. It doesn't come from an email. It comes from a silence that makes sense. I got my final check. It included a bonus they said had been long delayed. No explanation, no ceremony, just a signature at the bottom, written shakier than usual. I withdrew most of it in cash. Not because I didn't trust the system, because I didn't belong to it anymore. I spent my last day on the rooftop. Not many people knew it existed. Top floor, behind the old conference wing, accessed by a rusted metal door no one ever bothered to fix. I stood there for 15 minutes holding a paper cup of bitter coffee, watching the city shift under clouds that refused to break. I didn't feel pride, just space, like I'd finally made room inside myself for something other than defense. That night I got a message from an old intern. He'd been in the room when Brian was fired. He wrote, "I knew it was you. We all did. Thank you for showing me there's another way to win." I didn't reply. I just closed the laptop, folded the email into memory, and let it rest. Because sometimes justice doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need applause. It just needs to be complete. He left through the front door with silence behind him. I left through the rooftop already free. I moved to a town with no signal on half its streets, the kind of place where the grocery clerk remembers your dog's name before yours. I rented a cabin near the edge of a forest. No tech, no decks, just trees, wind, and the low hum of a world that didn't need me to build anything. I started fixing things, not code. Actual things. A cracked bench on the trail behind my house, a leaky faucet at the local library, the fuse box in the church that shorted. Every time it rained, people started leaving notes on my porch. Do you fix fences? Know anything about radiators? It wasn't charity. It was purpose, reclaimed. I taught a few kids basic logic and Python on the weekends, not to turn them into engineers, to show them what truth looks like when it's structured properly. One of them, quiet girl, big glasses, asked me once why I left the city. I smiled, said nothing. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. One morning, while chopping wood behind the cabin, I heard footsteps. A young man approached. Nervous, polite, said he was from the board. The new board, he handed me an envelope. Inside, a simple certificate. Recognition of foundational contribution. No money, no PR, just truth, printed and signed. I thanked him. Told him I had no walls that needed it. He left without asking questions. I burned the envelope that night in the fireplace, not out of anger, out of closure. The flames danced in silence, and I watched them until they faded into nothing. I sleep better. Now, there's a rhythm here that doesn't need calendars or keynotes. Some days I forget what I used to do. Most days I don't want to remember. But when I walk past the workshop I built behind the cabin, I see my old toolbox, and I remember that sometimes the most valuable systems aren't built to scale. They're built to last. I wasn't the only one they tried to erase, but I was the one who left a trace they couldn't cover.